We're good? All right. Well, hello, everyone. This is so lovely. It's wonderful to see you all. Thank you for coming. I'm Dan Rosenberg, the director of the Visiting Writers Series, and as is my wont and absolute pleasure at all times, hi locals, I want to thank NYSCA, the New York State Council for the Arts, for supporting all of the arts programming that we put on here at Wells and try to share with the wider community, like the lovely folks who just walked in. So I'm going to share some logistical info, introduce tonight's reader, get out of the way, and then I'll reappear at the very end to sort of close us out. So, some things that you should know. There are copies of Valzhyna Mort's latest book, Music for the Dead and Resurrected, available for purchase after the reading. They're right over there. You can buy them from me, and then she'll be happy to sign them if you like. I can do Venmo, PayPal, cash, cards, firstborn children, whatever you got, I will take it from you. A dance. Yeah. If you try to pay with it, you know what? Yes. But it has to be a real, like you have to commit to the dance. Commit to it. Second, I want Luna or nothing. Marco is worth nothing to me. There are also for sale these exquisite broadsides conceived and created by our very own Victor Hammer Fellow, Rebecca Gilbert. Yes. She chose this section, section 12, from one of Mort's poems for this project, and when I reached out and I said, is this okay? You know, it's not the whole poem, it's an excerpt, how do you feel about that? She responded, oh, I love broadsides, and I often read that as its own thing. We're on the same page, please do this is great. So for those of you who know anything about letterpress printing, you'll notice all the different colors on here and understand the deep, obsessive, labor-intensive work that goes into making such a thing. And so there are only 30 of these in the whole world, and so bare minimum, come up and admire them at the end of the reading with me. I will be doing that still. Okay. Now, that's my logistics. Now it's my great honor to introduce tonight's reader. Valzhyna Mort is a poet and translator born in Minsk, Belarus. She's the author of 3 poetry collections, most recently Music for the Dead and Resurrected, which was named one of the best poetry books of 2020 by the New York Times and NPR, and it won the 2020 International Griffin Poetry Prize and the 2022 UNT Rilke Prize. Mort is the recipient of many fellowships and honors, so many that I cut them out of the bio or I'd be here all night telling you. But they include the Guggenheim Foundation, the American Academy in Rome, the National Endowment for the Arts. She teaches at Cornell, writes in English and Belarusian, and translates between English, Belarusian, Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish. Valzhyna visited my poetry workshop today to talk with the students, and she was so generous, so generative, for these writers who had been studying her work and who had been finding their own ways into language, into creating for themselves and for their work a home out of language. Mort is a singularly wonderful poet, full stop. But she's also a wonderful poet to encounter early in one's poetry career because her work explodes the neat categories that many poetry readers latch onto from literature classes. Is she a political poet? A confessional poet, a feminist poet, a surreal poet? Is she a poet of incantation, maybe a spell weaver? Sure, why not? All of them if it helps you listen to the music. She said in an interview about writing a poem, I think that poetic craft is a matter of patient listening. I listen until there's no story, no information, only music. Personally, I think of Valzhyna Mort as a poet of permission, one who can give permission to take risks, to invite into the poem whatever language wants to be there, categories be damned. Describing this book, which includes poems that she wrote in Rome and poems set in Minsk, she says, I write neither from Rome nor from Minsk, nor from the US. I write from inside Valzhyna Mort. What am I like? Why is it so hard for me to understand myself? What is all of this inside me? What is all of this inside the people who brought me up? Can I describe the intimate situation of this city of myself? How exciting and liberating to read a poet who can teach us so much, not by being pedantic, but by being honest and open-handed and vulnerable. One poem from late in this book includes a kind of invocation of the muse. Muse with two tongues where wings should be, I begin with music, thrown onto meat scales in the city of acid. And I paused at the enjambments, at the line breaks there. And are those enjambments funny? Are they serious? Yes. Are they unmistakably the rich and complex voice of the poet Valzhyna Mort? Also yes. It would be easy to describe her, born in Belarus, living in Ithaca as a kind of exile, as someone who's obsessed with making that unique home in language because she is herself displaced. But she has something to say about that too. In a different interview, she says, I'm always drawn to a person who is not so much displaced as they are misplaced. Displacement presupposes a place of belonging left behind, a source of nostalgia. A misplaced person doesn't have such a place. A misplaced person submits to the fact that she has no other country but herself. I'm always grateful to visit that country, and I'm so excited that we get to go there together tonight. So let's go. Please welcome to the podium, Valzhyna Mort.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Daniel, for this beautiful introduction. I feel like if we could just go out drinking together, I could live up to it with what a fun person I am. It's harder with poetry. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much to Rebecca for creating this beautiful broadside. I really love it. I will read the poem, the part 12 of a long poem as it is, part 12, and in fact I'll try to read it in 2 languages. And thank you so much to the students who hosted me earlier today. There's, I see one. You see, this is the first and the last time you see me. I'm going to take you traveling, and I'll take you to Minsk, to a place that, like many places, has internalized a lot of violence, internalized a lot of silence, I'll start with this middle of a prose poem. So you know when it's done, I'm done with the longest poem I'm going to read. And then I'll move on to some shorter poems. And when I start reading in a language that is not English, it's the last little bit. So I'm not going to be like those Russian poets that go for 2 hours. No, I come as your neighbor here. So Minsk. Minsk has 4 distinct seasons. Each is its own country. Winter is like being inside the static of an untuned TV. Inside the winter's static, schools' marble hallways stretch like a long electric buzz. Winter's ice debris is magnetized by the palace of the Republic, a gray planet that commands the rings of snowstorms. There are people bent over in the ice debris. There's blood on the snow. There are police truncheons raised like black wheat. A city square of truncheons rising and falling like black wheat in the storm. When I look out of the school window, it's always a winter night, and there is always blood in the snow. In the winter dark, the art teacher is projecting Rembrandts onto a blackboard. She wants us to understand something about Rembrandt's darkness, but I look outside, and it's dark, and there is blood in the snow. She shows us Leonardo's Madonna Lita, points to the ripped stitches on the Madonna's dress. The mother decided to stop breastfeeding and had stitched up the nursing slits in her dress, the teacher explains. But the divine child must have cried, asking for breast milk, and she ripped the threads. The art teacher wants us to be moved. But my grandmother made her living sewing dresses simple like 2 + 2, and most of my clothes are handmade. The magnetic pool of the Palace of the Republic is growing stronger and makes my head ache. The Madonna's face is white without a single stroke visible on it. It seems to be washed in chlorine, and mixing with the bitter feeling about my grandmother's sewing, my stomach turns. Outside it's winter static. There are people bent there, and there is blood in the snow. Schools' lit-up corridors are washed with chlorine. What else is without a stroke? The smooth marble of monuments, the smooth marble of school corridors, the smooth marble of gravestones. Corridor, currere, a place for running. Running in the hallways is forbidden. On each shoulder I have epaulets of snow. There was often blood in the snow by the dental clinic next to our block, but there is more blood in the snow by the Palace of the Republic. Blood debris circles around the Palace of the Republic, magnetized. I close my eyes and open them again. When my eyes open, they make a sound like a creaking swing. It's the swing that winds up all the watches in microregions. It's the watches that mothers look into like into mirrors. They adjust their hair. Each hair on their heads is a clock hand held up by hairspray. Mothers live inside concrete carpets of light. I walk brushing them gently away from my face, only suddenly it's pages of a book I'm brushing. I run through corridors. Correre, correre, I croak over the black wheat. I swim up the still water of staircases, holding my breath. Inside history books, mothers are feeding the dead with our unsatisfying homework. I too am a mother, and I wipe blood from the snow with a public bus ticket. After being carried in a purse next to a warm loaf of bread, the ticket is soft. Here's my grandmother stitching punched bus tickets back up. Here are the columns of the Palace of the Republic punching holes in the people's heads. Ice debris circles around the Palace of the Republic. There is a secret corridor that leads from an ice crystal on the square to the crystal ball in our cupboard. But the entrance into the ice crystal is blocked with a drop of blood. Some winters are like being inside the static of a TV channel that has stopped showing the news. I look out of the window to see what's going on at the Palace of the Republic, but I have to look through the darkness of Rembrandt first. I see a large square planted with a black wheat of police truncheons thrashing in the snowstorm. I'm safe behind the marble tape of school corridors. And corridor means either run, or there's nowhere to run, or time is running out. I fail my history class, which is a class on the origins of the word corridor. Is it a corridor or a corridor of shame? Is it perhaps not a corridor, but a long apartment block? Is it a Stalin line, the Pale of Settlement, the exclusion zone? Operation Winter Magic was aimed at creating a depopulation zone on the Belarusian-Latvian border. Several hundred villages were burned, with all the civil population gathered inside the barns. This is why we do not build barns anymore. We built the Palace of the Republic. The Palace of the Republic won't let us be burned inside it. But first, there's blood in the snow. But first, we have to do something with all of this blackened wheat caught in the ice storm. This is the winter magic that is not winter magic. I live in an overpopulated microregion in a previously depopulated country, and my hero is a hero city, and there is blood in the snow. I'm safe behind the marble tape of school corridors. A type of torture practiced by the employees of the Palace of the Republic is called a corridor. The employees of the Palace of the Republic line up in 2 rows facing each other, thus forming a corridor. Correre, correre. They force the detainees to run through this corridor while they beat the detainees with truncheons. Correre, correre. This is not the old winter magic, but it's always winter. The art teacher is speechless in front of Rembrandt. Correre, correre, I close my eyes with a creak. I try to shut my eyelids like a creaking garlic mincer. Let my mother hear the creaking. Let her start wiping her hands. Not books, but a street opened my mouth like a doctor's spatula. One by one, streets introduced themselves with the names of national murderers. In the state archives, covers hardened like scabs over the ledges. Inside a tiny apartment, I built myself into a separate room, peopled it with the Calibans of plans for the future. Future that runs on the schedule of public buses. From the zoo to the circus, what future? What is your alibi for these ledges, these streets, this apartment? Future. In the purse that held through 7 wars, the birth certificates of the dead, my grandmother hid from me chocolates. The purse opened like a screaming mouth. The purse opened like a screaming mouth. Its 2 shiny buckles watched me through doors, through walls, through jazz. Who taught you to be a frightening face, purse? I kiss your buckles. I swear myself your subject. August, apples, I have nobody. August, for me, a ripe apple is a brother. For me, a 4-legged table is a pet. In the temple of supermarket, I stand like a candle in the line to the priestesses who preserve the knowledge of sausage prices, the virginity of milk cartons, my future small change. Future that runs on the schedule of public buses. Streets introduce themselves with the names of national murderers. I build myself into a separate room where memory, the illegal migrant in time, cleans up after imagination. In a room where memory strips the beds, linens that hardened like scabs on the mattresses, I kiss little apples, my brothers. I kiss the buckles that watch us through walls, through years, through jazz, chocolates from a purse that held through 7 wars, the birth certificates of the dead. Hold me, brother apple. We'll go from a public bus to a train. I love metaphor, and I blame my love for metaphor on the Chernobyl disaster. Because I was 4 when the reactor at the Chernobyl plant exploded and the largest mass of radiation fell on Belarus. And we started questioning everything in front of us. Nothing was what it was. Everything had this potential of turning into poison, into a monster. I was on the way here, I was listening to a New Yorker podcast, and Annie Ernaux was discussed, a great writer, French writer, and the 2 conversationalists, 2 interlocutors were saying that because Arnie comes from poverty, her writing is so unembellished. Because only writers who come from wealth, apparently, can embellish and manifest their wealth through embellishment. So I'm very grateful that I have Chernobyl to blame my love for embellishment on. So you won't think that I came from wealth. God forbid. The trees I've glimpsed from the window of a night train were the saddest trees. They seemed about to speak, then vanished like soldiers. The hostesses handed out starched linens for sleep. Passengers bent over small icons of sandwiches. In a tall glass, a spoon mixed sugar into coffee, banging its silver face against the facets. The window reflected back a figure struggling with white sheets. The posts with names of towns promised a possibility of words for what flew by. In lit-up windows, people seemed to move as if performing surgery on tables. Chestnut Park sighed the size of creatures capable of speech. Radiation, an etymology of soil directed into the future, prepared a thesis on the new origins of old roots, on secret, disfiguring missions of misspellings, on the shocking betrayal of apples, on the uncompromised loyalty of cesium. My childish voice, my hands, my feet, all my things that live on the edges of me. Shh, now. The chestnut parks, I bowed to speak. But now they vanished. I was extracted from my apartment block, chained to the earth with iron playgrounds, where iron swings rose like oil wells. I was extracted before I could dig a language out of air with my childish feet. I was extracted by beaks, storks, cranes. See the conductor punching out eyes of sleeping passengers. What is it about my face that turns it into a document, into a ticket stretched out by a neck? Why does unfolding this starched bedding feel like skinning someone invisible? Why can't the spoons, head down in glasses, stop screaming? Shh, the chestnuts I about to speak. This next poem takes you to a tiny little village in Belarus called Vishnyovka. So I try to take you to a little bit of a magical space where chestnuts speak. And the events of this poem, the feelings of this poem take place on a New Year's night, which is a magical night when time shifts. So everything that happens in a poem is perfectly and logically justified by that time shift. Is a lullaby. Snow glints and softens a pig's slaughter. Mama refuses another drink. Mama agrees to another drink. On the wall, a carpet with peonies, their purple mouths suck me into sleep. Small, I've been bedded. Toasts through the wall, my lullabies. Mama says, no, 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 to more drink. My bed smells of Vilenica. Without taking its eyes off me, a cat licks its gray paw as if sharpening a knife. Mama yells yes to another drink. Mama's breasts are too big to fit into packed morning buses. There is uncertainty. I will grow into a real person, but on a certain day in Vishnyovka, a pig is slaughtered. Mama whispers, yes, 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 to more drink. I am vanishing into the peonies' throats. Peonies smell of Vilenica, of pig's blood on the snow. Clock's hands leave a strange ski track. This penultimate poem takes place on the outskirts of Minsk. There is a Kuropatki forest there, And in 1930s, thousands of people were executed there by NKVD. It still remains almost 100 years later, a contested site. We do not know how many people are buried there, whether we could call it a burial at all, because those are just executions and people thrown into pits. Why they were murdered, who they are, what their names are. It is a contested site, as I said. So I thought I'll call out to Antigone, who was defiant and good at burying her dead, and volunteer to be her sister. To Antigone, a dispatch. Allegro for shooing off the police, adagio for washing the body, scherzo for soft laughter and tears, rondo for covering the body with good earth. Antigone, dead siblings are set. As for the living, pick me for a sister. I too love a proper funeral. Drag, Deegan sisters, pop up, burial. Landlady, I make the rounds of graves, keeping up my family's top-notch properties. On a torture instrument called an accordion, I stretch my fingers into the finger bones of a witch. My guts have been emptied like bellows for the best sound. Once we settle your brother, I'll show you forests of the unburied dead. We'll clean the way only two sisters can clean a house. No bones scattered like dirty socks. No ashes at the bottom of bone china. Why bicker with husbands about dishes when we've got mountains of skulls to shine? Labor and retribution will share, not girly secrets. Brought up by dolls and monuments, I have the bearing of a horse and a bitch. I'm cement in tears. You can spot my graves from afar, marble like newborn skin. Here, history comes to an end like a movie with rolling credits of headstones with uncredited rolls of mass graves. Every ditch, every hill is suspect. Pick me for a sister, Antigone. In this suspicious land, I have a bright shovel of a face. Put your bones into braids of graves, woods. Put your bones into braids of graves, ravines. Put your bones into braids of graves, fields. Put your bones into braids of graves, swamps. Put your graves into braids of bones, mother. Put your graves into braids of bones, moth. Put your graves into braids of bones, ghost. Put your graves into braids of bones, guest. Braid your bones neatly. Braid your bones bravely. Finger comb your bones into neat braids in our woods, ravines, fields, swamps. Прибери своей костью косы могил, лес. Прибери своей костью косы могил, яр. Прибери своей костью косы могил, обшар. Прибери своей костью косы мобил, бор. Прибери могилы у косы костей, имшара. Прибери могилы у косы костей, хваля. Прибери могилы у косы костей, далеч. Прибери могилы у косы костей, сдань. Пальцами зрубами запляти костью косы, не грубыми, запляти костью косы, не гребуй, запляти костью косы. Пальцами грабянями запляти кости у опошние косы, у лесе яры обшары, имшары.
Q&A time.
My favorite bagel is pumpernickel. I write with both. A pen and computer. My favorite writer is Shakespeare, yes.
So do you translate your own work, or is it something you
So I write parallelly. Belarusian, which is one of the two languages in which I write, is not my proper mother tongue. I'm like the worst thing a poet can be. Like, I have some good things going for me as a poet. Like, I'm a totally sick, obsessed person. Those are important things. But I do not have a proper mother tongue. I grew up thinking that I speak Russian, but of course I spoke Belarusian Russian. My grandmother, who brought me up, spoke what we call a trasyanka, which means a shaken up language, a mixture of Belarusian, Russian, and Polish. It was a Russian-speaking environment, except that we knew we were Belarusians, and there was this language that was Belarusian. It was just not very clear what it was for. When I started writing in Belarusian, not the language I was speaking daily. It was a little bit of a secret. It was private. It felt very private because it was not a daily language. It was an escape, a language to escape into. Russian language was spoken by all the adults, I feared. I started writing young. All the teachers spoke Russian. Then the shop assistants, they come up in the book a lot because I grew up in the Soviet Union. One of most powerful positions you could occupy in the Soviet Union was a cashier at a store. And so somebody who has this little power over you in this transaction and who guards the goods from you. Controllers, I took a public bus to school 5 days of the week, so the ticket controllers. So Belarusian was this escape from the authoritarian language of the adult world. And it's also a very beautiful musical language, full of sounds that to me are very similar to English. Like what in Belarusian is all this earthy, mouthfully sh. In English, it's all shr. That's what I go for a lot. That's why there are lots of trees in my poems, because I just love the tree and shrub. Like these monosyllables in English are beautiful. I started writing in Belarusian, and at some point I was being asked the question whether it was a political choice. I don't know how political the choice was. I think it's very political for a child to say, I'm going to, but you do not think of politically, right, like that as a child, but you know that if you write your heart into the page, you're not going to do it in your parents' language and in your teacher's language. But it was truly that, I don't know how, it was just intuitive. But to continue writing in it after you discover that maybe only 10% of your country's population are willing to read in it. And that's the consequence of Russification. When I was growing up, we didn't use the word Russian colonialism, the phrase that has been used so much since the war in Ukraine. It was just simply called Russification. We were Russified people, and we thought of ourselves as these Russian Belarusians or Belarusian Russians, and all the books came to us from Russia. All our music was Russian. All our films were Russian, and it seemed right because also during World War II, which was the biggest myth in the Eastern Europe and the biggest truth of the Eastern European trauma. Belarus was the last patch of land that stood between the Nazi Germany and the Soviet Russia, Moscow. So everybody had to burn in Belarus before the Germans could move towards Russia. But also a lot of people, as any borderland, we were caught between maybe wanting some independence, and so then but we cannot fight the two. But some people tried and failed miserably. So then it became, then the knowledge of the literary world, knowing that you're limiting your readership drastically. Nobody learns this language anyway abroad. Nobody's going to translate you. You will always be considered a little bit country because of it, because it's, of course, the peasants, it's always the uneducated that carry the burden of preservation of culture. So the language was preserved in its most live form in the rural parts. So if you write in it, you will forever be associated also with rural Belarus, which we were, of course, trying so hard to overcome. So then it became a conscious choice to say, yes, I'm not going to switch into Russian, which would be a kind of a logical thing to do. I'm going to stick with this language, yeah. And then English came in, because you also want to be heard, after all, you discover. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On that note, I'm curious how you're thinking about music as one of these languages that you're moving through. And I noticed in one of the poems you read, you used the Italian scherzo, rondo.
Yeah.
And just, how you're thinking about that as among the many translations you're doing.
Music, the cliche goes universal language, that becomes actually the most solid thing for me to stand on. So there are different types of poets. Some poets are really invested in the language, and they're all about showing you how much, say, English can do, and reminding you of all of those little words that fall into obscurity, and all of those kind of muscles that are underutilized. And they readjust like a chiropractor. They readjust. They show you how limited and pathetic our daily speech is. Yes. And so it's an awakening. And like for a day, you want to be a better speaker of your language, which also makes you somehow a better, more aware, more attentive person. You become more attentive to everything. I do not think of myself as a poet invested in that. So my theory is that then I'm gonna go for images. Image is my touchstone, because image is translatable. Image can exist between languages, and it also helps me, a kind of a homeless poet, to populate reality with things. To create this world of things and objects and people. But one image, well, it can be a poem, but often you have more than one. So how you move from one image to the next image to the next image, what is that? That's music. And so, the movement through images is what tells a story for a person who has no story to tell. And it is music that makes it possible. So we were talking music or truth or music. For me, surely, poetry is music, and I follow the sound and the rhythm. And it's what's amazing about language is that you discover that sound and music is semantic. So that kind of, it's not just the dictionary with its, meaning one, meaning two, meaning three, but that in a poem everything is semantic. Everything means, and in fact, this soundscape is more polysemantic, it's more potent with meaning than the meanings of the word, which is why in a poem a word can mean anything, depending on its entourage, depending on how it is grouped. And so then music is not just for the oral effect, it's not just like to say this is musical and it's like quaint and beautiful and pleasant, even though that's also important, I think. To be pleasant, I think, is important. Yeah, like to comfort and to disturb, both is important. Sometimes poets overemphasize unsettling and disturbing. But I'm also a reader of poetry who is super disturbed as a human being and a person, so I go for comfort. I'm really grateful for poets who comfort me. But what it's when what the sound then, the correspondences in the sound is how those meanings then clash. So the sound rhymes. The sound says these are words of the same family. Yes, the semantics, the dictionary says these words have nothing to do with each other. And there's the tension when suddenly words form families based on how they sound, how they create music together, even though semantically they're not supposed to be together. But now they are. And so they can mean so much more through those new families. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a follow-up.
Yeah.
Music question. So when I was thinking about the title of your book and the last poem that you read, and I found it very moving, and it felt kind of like a lullaby, and just what you were saying right now about putting those words into combinations with each other, like and the music underlying that, the bones being woven into like the graves being woven into bones. I was just wondering, like, in terms of singing a lullaby to the dead, like helping the dead to sleep, was that something that you think poetry's for?
I love that. Like, I love when you answer your own question. Yeah. It means,
Belarus and Lithuania are neighbor with which we shared actually a country for a long time. We were the last territory in Europe to get Christianized. And we have very strong pagan tradition, which is about the dead and the honoring of the ancestors and of the dead. And now it's mixed up in a very beautiful way with Christianity mostly. But we do celebrate the Day of the Dead more than once a year. But definitely you do it in the fall and in spring. And when we go to the graves, because we go to the graves, we eat on the graves and we talk to the graves in a very normal voice. It's a no big deal thing. And the first question is always, how is the sleep going? Yeah. How is it for you to sleep? Meaning, is it soft? Are you sleeping softly? So in this way, it's a beautiful answer that you gave for me. Yeah, it is a way of saying, are you sleeping softly? Because we, the living, are certainly not. Yeah. Yeah, and then. Mm-hmm.
Okay, first. Okay, I'll go. But mine, I think, picks up on that question about image and language and music, and James's last question about lullabies to the dead also. So I spend probably more time than anyone on this campus in the dark with Rembrandt. So I'm really moved by that section of the poem, and thinking about, like, it just hit me in such a way, thinking about, like, that feeling of, like, wanting someone else to be moved, or watching somebody be moved and wishing you were moved like them. And then the image of kind of like looking through the darkness on the screen to the blood on the snow outside. And I guess like that made me think a lot about the role that art and language plays in sort of bringing us to a place where we feel moved by violent past. And I guess I've been trying to figure out how to put that into a question, but I'm wondering how that works for you, like how you think about the link, because I feel it so much in all of your work, like this navigation of pain that comes up through language, and like how you think about that relationship between art and violence.
I'm very happy to pick up on this thread. I spent cumulatively a year and a half in Rome, and that's where for the first time saw Caravaggio's work in its proper place, the way that it was meant to be hung in those Roman churches. And the reason why I'm bringing up Caravaggio is because Rembrandt saw that too, and that's where Rembrandt's darkness comes from. Only Caravaggio painted religious scenes I was particularly moved by all of that, what is that word for decrossing, for taking off the cross, and Christ's body being taken off the cross. There is a term for it, and then in Rembrandt you see it more in a secular way. You see these old people emerging out of darkness. But what struck me then with Caravaggio is that before that I really only saw art in museums, on very well lit hallways, on perfect white walls. And Caravaggio hangs not only in the darkness of these chapels, when he worked there, painting them in the dark, and there would be like a little, but it also, let me finish my sentence, it also hangs at an angle, because his works hang in these alcove-like chapels. So you don't really face them, but you see them from an angle. And they all have this completely black background. And on the black background, out of it emerges a gray body that just kind of shines through the darkness with its grayness. And there is a little light on the top always, but it's too high. But depending on what time of the day you come into, you'll see the work illuminated differently. And if you go now in Rome, they have a little machine, and you throw a euro, and the light goes on. And so it illuminates everything for you. So you could, for €1, you could see it, like you could see it almost like in a museum, because it still hangs too high and too strange at an angle. So you still have to stand like that. But now it's lit up. But I love to look at it. I love to look at it in the dark. And it made a very huge impression on me, the idea of that even though there is an enormous canvas, probably like gold painted, but still this body emerges just from the wall. That's how it looks. And it's just suspended in the air at this awkward angle, and I was very moved, and I remembered my art teacher who struggled with us so much. We were what sometimes in the former Soviet countries described as the wolf generation. Because we were kids. I was born in 1981, and so I was 10 when Soviet Union collapsed. And so I came of age when the country that I lived in disappeared, and then this new country emerged, and I was supposed to recognize it as my own, but it also was a lot of pressure. And history came out of nowhere. Our history came out of nowhere. It was a lot to handle for a child. And so this wolf thing is that we lived in this environment, prisons opened. So people got released. Then capitalism arrived very brutally. and it unsettled everything. It was a total chaos. And there was no food. Yeah, those grocery stores were empty. And in this situation of a lot of violence, empty grocery stores, our parents are protesting the fact that we're studying history of Belarus. Because they say, what is this? They're already overloaded. What is this invented history? People are debating whether Minsk should be called Mensk. And in the middle of it stands my art teacher with her Rembrandts, and she then seems to us, she seemed so out of touch. She seemed so irrelevant, and we were cruel, mean children who by then understood that you either eat or you are eaten. There is like no middle ground. And everywhere you go, violence is encouraged, meanness is encouraged, cruelty is celebrated, and anybody who can be cruel, who could cheat and lie and get away with it, was given by my parents, by all of our parents, as models of how to survive in this situation of a total collapse of everything. And so all of my classmates are scattered all over the world. We all ran. We all ran like crazy. And everywhere we go, we come across, and I've been softening myself for years, but we come across as people who are going to eat you. Because, and people would say, you're so categorical, you never change it. But no, I'm the softest, kindest person, But it has to do with that. And so this teacher stands in the middle of it all with her Rembrandts. But now, as, a person in my early 40s, I'm so grateful to the fact that I had her standing in the middle of this collapsed country. All of these protests are happening everywhere. And I just, that she clicks her little thing, and the slides change, and these strange old faces are emerging at you, and she wants us to be moved badly. And I want to say I'm finally moved. I'm so moved and comforted by the fact that I think she taught me then, and what in this past quite several years of the very intense news cycle we live in has been so important to me, is the insistence on the private life, on your own inner private life. That it is possible to do it as you live through all of it.
Now we have our last word.
Geez, I don't know all that. So my question is, what advice would you give to poets and writers, just because your relationship to what you do seems very beautiful, and that is
in the classroom I visited before, we were actually how dull the writing process is as the life of a writer. It's true, you get to travel sometimes and meet people that maybe other people do not, though maybe if you're a doctor, you do too. Or you see that I contradict myself. No. You can be a doctor, an accountant. There are a lot of other people who meet a lot of people at different times. I think that the life of a writer is, a poet particular, is extremely dull. And because it takes a lot of, it's just days of moving words around one line. Or thinking about a comma or a period, or thinking between two words, and so your friends are picking between two love interests. Should I go with this person or with that person? And you are there thinking, should I use a comma? Should I not use a comma? And so, like, which choice is more, who has a more exciting life? not a poet. So, but I try, so actually it's an effort for a hermetic person to have a life. It's so important. Everybody, anytime I get a call and a friend says, drive me there, help me with this, I put everything away and do it as a poet, because I feel that it's important for me to do things, like to get away from the desk and to do things that others would find unpoetic, or like I could be writing an essay right now, somebody says, like, or a poem. So the advice is to get out and to have a life, but then if you already have a life, to have a second life in which you read a lot, and I'm going to say read a lot of international authors, so you do not think of your voice as a universal voice or the only voice. Read a lot and write. Yeah, write all the time, and then have time to also live. Yeah, and watch the news and go to museums and travel. Yeah, so have a lot of energy. Yeah. Live long. Live long. Yeah.
Greta, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very briefly, yes, live many lives. I just want this is our last Visiting Writers event of the semester, and so I do my normal thing where I will remind you of books and broadsides available for sale. I will note that the broadsides are cheaper tonight than they will be in the future. They are on a special discount for people who are here tonight, and if you are a student who is here tonight, an even steeper discount. So, because we know that you're all poor.
Student enroll immediately.
Yes, come get it. So I wanted to remind you of that, and the books, for what it's worth, are from Buffalo Street Books, which is Ithaca's community-owned cooperative bookstore, and so it's a great space that you're supporting if you buy a book here. It's not, I did not get these from Amazon for you. This is it for the semester, and it has been such a joy to see so many people coming to these events, and I think this might be one of the bigger turnouts that we've had all semester, which is not the time in the semester when that happens. This is when you're all freaking out. So I'm doubly grateful for you all making the work of putting this series together feel like it's serving a community. So that's really special and meaningful to me. So next semester we'll be back with all sorts of other events. Wherever you learned about these, keep looking there, and other things will arise. I want to thank our good friends at IT for doing all the recording and supporting us all semester. Thank you, IT guys. I want to thank my intern, Kate Farney, over there, who's been quietly solving all the problems. I want to thank you all again for coming here, and I will ask you to join me in once more thanking and celebrating our reader tonight, Valzhyna Mort. All right, have a great night, everyone.